pupils. Nice to be with you again. How are you doing? I hope you're fine. I am fine also. Welcome to our lesson on Christian religious knowledge. But before we move to our main lesson, let's do revision on our previous episode. In our previous episode, our topic was kindness to others. We narrated the story of the Good Samaritan. We also mentioned people in need of help in our community, and they include the orphans, the sick, homeless, etc. Ways we can help the needy around us. We can help the needy around us by praying for them, by sharing material things with them, and also by visiting them. Now, on this episode, our topic is Jesus sends the Holy Spirit. You can see it in Acts 2, chapter 1 to 13. Now, let's look at the specific objectives before we move to our main lesson. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to define Pentecost, describe the events of the day of Pentecost, and state the significance of the day of Pentecost. Now let's look at the meaning of Pentecost. Pentecost is the day the Holy Spirit descended upon the disciples of Jesus Christ. After the resurrection of Jesus Christ, he made a promise to the disciples that he would send the Holy Spirit upon them. Then on the day of Pentecost, the promise was fulfilled. Jesus Christ showered the disciples with the Holy Spirit. Now let's look at the event of the Pentecost. When Jesus Christ resurrected from death, he told the disciples not to depart from Jerusalem, but should wait for the promise of the Holy Spirit. The disciples returned to Jerusalem and gathered at the upper room, and they devoted themselves to prayer. When the day of Pentecost came, they were all gathered in the upper room in Jerusalem. And suddenly, a sound came from heaven like the rush of mighty wind, and it filled the house where the disciples gathered. And there appeared to them tongues of fire, resting upon their heads, and they were filled with the Holy Spirit, and they began to speak in other tongues, as the Spirit gave them understanding. Then after the Holy Spirit had descended on the disciples, and they began to speak in different languages, the people around thought they were drunk. But Peter stood up and explained to the people that the disciples were not drunk, but they were inspired by the Holy Spirit. Then Peter preached to the people to turn from their sins to God. Then about 3,000 people turned from their sins and accepted Jesus Christ. They were baptized. Now let's look at the significance of Pentecost. 1. It brings about the birth of church. 2. Fulfill promise of a comforter. 3. Salvation of many souls. 4. Boldness to live a holy life and preach the gospel. When the Holy Spirit descended on the disciples, they have confidence. They were no more afraid to go out to the world and preach the gospel. And they also preached the gospel and converted people to God. And the new believers started fellowshipping together, and this brings about the birth of new church. So if you don't have the gift of the Holy Spirit in you, you need to pray, because the Holy Spirit will guide us on what to do and how to go about preaching the gospel. So it is time for you to sit yourself and pray to God to shower you with the gift of the Holy Spirit, because you can't do anything without the gift of the Holy Spirit. Now let's look at the lesson again for better understanding. First, we define Pentecost as the day the Holy Spirit descended upon the disciples of Jesus Christ. We also look at the events of the day of Pentecost. And we also mention the significance of the Pentecost. And they include fulfillment of God's promise, and also the disciples were bold enough to go out to the world and preach the gospel to the people. Now let's look at our homework. You're going to answer the following questions. 1. What is Pentecost? 2. State 2 significance of Pentecost. We have come to the end of a lesson. Do your homework and have a lovely day. Bye-bye.